The world is vastly unequal in that extreme poverty actually coexists with extreme riches. According to a recent survey, the top 10 richest people in the world actually control 50% of all the wealth in the world. However, the bottom 50% of people actually contribute or control just 8% of all the wealth in the world. And that is why in today's video, we'll be looking at the 9-time tested principles of riches that you can actually adopt and then subsequently leave the habit of having to live paycheck to paycheck and then steer yourself subsequently towards the attainment of your financial goals. And so if you're new here, my name is Nana. I hold a master's degree in business finance, and on this channel, we discuss everything personal finance and personal development. This brings us to the first principle of making money, and that is you need to leverage your time. And so if you're currently working a 9 to 5 or trading time in exchange for money, then this is the time for you to actually sit down humbly and then reflect. Because according to a research by Goldman Sachs, by 2045, that is 20 years from now, AI will be replacing 50% of all jobs across the globe. And that is something that might not sound so urgent until you realize that about 60% of all people working in the US economy, that is about 100 million people, are living paycheck to paycheck. So think about it. In the near future, if AI should actually take on all these jobs, already with access to job and several paychecks coming in at the end of the month, still people are finding themselves living below the level of economic subsistence. And that is why it is necessary for you to try as much as possible to diversify your income streams as it stands now, so that 20 years from now, holding all other factors constant, if these predictions turn out to be true, you know that you're fortified against the influx of AI agents. This brings us to the second principle of making money, and that is to follow the wealth equation. So as opposed to having to focus solely on your income, what the ultra rich do is that they focus on building assets or taking on leverage or taking on loans to build assets that subsequently in the future generate some form of income, and that also helps them to become financially free. So don't only focus on your income or try as much as possible to work extra hours to bring in money. Of course, a chunk of that money that is coming in is even going to the government. As opposed to that, find ways and means of assuming or buying assets that would in the near future work for you and then replace you or replace you having to trade time in the form of your 9 to 5 in exchange for money. That is one of the surest ways that the ultra rich actually build wealth and then sustain themselves in the long run. This brings us to the third principle of building wealth or making money, and that is start before you're ready. So the ultra rich know one thing, that decisiveness would actually ensure that you're able to take advantage of every single opportunity that you come across in life. Most of the poor people out there are actually stuck in one state, and that is the analysis paralysis state, or they are held back by imposter syndrome. They want to get everything perfect before actually launching out to execute in accordance with their goal. And that is one of the main reasons why they do not achieve their goals at the end of the year. If you truly want to join the 8% of people who actually set goals and then eventually achieve those goals, then you need to know that decisiveness is one of the key things that you need to adopt in order to actually steer yourself towards the attainment of your goals. Try as much as possible and then reduce your risk aversion and then get started and then perfect things over time. That is one of the surest ways for you to actually get to the destination that you so wish. This brings us to the fourth principle, and that is to master your money psychology. And so according to the Millionaire Next Door, about 90% of all the millionaires that were actually interviewed for that book actually assumed one position, and that is they were all frugal in that they weren't actually succumbing to what is popularly known as lifestyle creep, which also means that anytime that their income actually goes up, their expenses also follows the same direction. One thing that you need to know is that if you truly want to build and sustain wealth, you need to program your mind into believing that frugality is one of the key reasons and the key things that you need to realize before you actually get to your goals. One thing that you need to do simply is to try and then live below your means and then save the excess and then invest what is left at the end of the month. That is one of the surest ways for you to actually build wealth. It is also considered one of the most boring yet effective ways that you can actually build wealth over the long run. This brings us to the fifth principle of making money, and that is you have to try everything. So more often than not, what we actually tend to focus on is that anytime that we set a goal and we do not see any results within the shortest possible time, we tend to give up entirely on that goal. As opposed to this, you need to master one thing called the law of the aggregation of marginal gains. In that, if you set a goal for yourself, try and then stick around long enough to see the results, because every single little contribution or the 1% improvements that you make over time is what would add up in the long run and then realize that success or the results that you want to see. So try and then incorporate the habit or the value of consistency and patience in everything that you do, especially when it comes to building wealth, because all the rich people out there actually did one thing for a very long time before seeing results, and then subsequently they were able to focus that energy and the resources that they gained from that particular venture into other streams and then diversifying their income streams as a result. This brings us to the sixth principle of making money, and that is to choose the right business model. So most people out there actually find themselves in the wrong business model in that they actually assume things that they don't have any interest in. One of the easiest ways for you to excel, according to Warren Buffett, is to do something that you love. Don't just do things simply because it is paying you or it is bringing in something at the end of the month. So what you have to do is that try and incorporate some form of fun or some form of joy into every single thing that you set your mind to achieve. And that is one of the surest ways for you to actually build wealth and to sustain yourself in the long run. Try and then incorporate or build things around your hobby. For instance, if you really set out to start a side hustle, try and then make sure that the side hustle that you're starting is something that you're interested in that it wouldn't actually serve as another job aside your 9 to 5. That is one of the surest ways for you to actually excel in that field, because anytime that you find yourself doing something that you have so much interest in, it makes it twice as easy, and that also ensures your success in the long run. This brings us to the seventh principle of money making, and that is to leverage on other people's skills and their talents. One thing that the ultra rich know and they do very well is that they fall on the advice or probably the skill set of other people in order to realize their goals. They don't actually set out to do everything or to attain everything on their own. And that is one thing that actually holds several millions of people back in life. Imposter syndrome is actually fueled by one condition, and that is the soloist approach to becoming productive in life, in that you feel like you've got to do everything on your own. As opposed to this, the ultra rich actually fall on the advice. And so they actually employ the services of business analysts, several experts in several fields, in order to give them the advice, in order to execute in accordance with their goals. And that is one thing that you need to know. You have to surround yourself with people that actually challenge you and push you a step towards the attainment of your financial goals. And that is one of the surest ways for you to actually become successful. This brings us to the eighth principle of making money, and that is to reinvest, don't just spend. So one of the key reasons why Warren Buffett is today who he is simply because he reinvested all proceeds in the form of dividends, and that is why he was able to take advantage of compound interest by investing in several companies in the stock market. What you have to do is that you need to try as much as possible and then live below your means, save, and then invest the excess, because that is one of the surest ways and the fastest ways for you to actually build wealth, because accumulation of all these gains over the long run would ensure that you actually go on to attain your goals insofar as any financial endeavor that you undertake in life is concerned. This brings us to the last principle, and that is to be consistent and not just brilliant. So human beings are wired in that we tend to be biased towards things that are likely going to deliver some form of result in the shortest possible time. And that is what is popularly known as instant gratification. As opposed to that, what you have to do is that you need to prioritize delayed gratification. You need to stay consistent and stay true and loyal to your goals. And if you don't give up entirely on your goal, you're likely going to see the realization of those goals. And that is what the ultra rich tend to know, and they tend to prioritize more often than not. So they stay consistent and they stay loyal to their goals for as long as it takes, as long as they're going to see the results, they're never going to give up. And that is one of the things that you need to adopt in order to steer yourself towards the attainment of your financial goals. And so thank you for spending time with us, and see you in the next video.